At some point on the spiritual awakening journey, you will have heard rejection is protection. And the idea behind this is that very often we are wired to always see rejection as something to avoid. And when you embark on the spiritual awakening journey, what you realize is that being rejected is actually sometimes to your benefit, if not always. I don't like to use black and white thinking in general, but sometimes it's helpful to communicate in contrasting terms to help us solidify some of the differences that we see in these different thought constructs. And at some point as well, you will become acquainted with resistance. And I remember before I was conscious, and definitely well before my spiritual awakening journey, I saw resistance and overcoming it as almost like a badge of honor. And I've talked about it before here and there, but I saw it as climbing a mountain, and the more strenuous and challenging the mountain was, the more it was for me. And there was a sort of egoic pride buried in doing this and accomplishing feats of impossibilities. And I won't go into personal examples because it's not really important. But this was what I realize now was a very, very unhealthy, if not toxic pattern that I had. Because it drew me to doors that were very, very difficult to open. And it is true that, again, nothing is black and white. It's not all and none, or all or none. Salmon are built to swim upstream, and there is something gratifying about going to the gym and lifting weights and pushing yourself to the next level. So the next part of this that I want to really dig into is not at odds with that. Instead, what I would ask you to do is to be very, very mindful about your relationship with resistance, and to be very conscious and intentional about when you embark on resisting paths and journeys versus when you choose the path of least resistance. Because there is a healthy relationship with pushing yourself in the face of adversity or things that challenge you or outright resistance. But what I'm going to talk about is the pathological attachment to it as a way to cover up any sort of self-esteem or self-concept wounds or egoic conquering pride, because those are rooted in the wrong reasons. And what you find is, especially with the latter, is that people will compulsively climb mountains and get to the top and then say, okay, what next? And it's like they reach this pinnacle of success or some level, and then they're off to the next challenge. And when that happens in a purely mindless and compulsive way that at its core is driven by the need to fill a hole or emptiness, or to prove one's value or credibility or success or accomplishments to oneself and to others. It is a consciousness trap. Doing so mindlessly traps you in cycles of repetitive behavior. Sure, the hobbies might be different. The mountains might be different. The skills that you acquire might be different, but the emptiness inside that is being covered up, ignored, or abated is not. And as a result, what happens is that the ability to choose and to select which mountains and challenges to incorporate in your life goes away. And this is a barrier to ascension, because not only does the ascension process require a high degree of consciousness and intentionality in your manifestations, but it also requires finesse and adaptability. And now, being further on the spiritual awakening journey, what I have come to appreciate is resistance is a very, very important indicator. And it can mean different things. But before I unpack my relationship with resistance, I would like to ask you to reflect for a moment on what resistance means to you. What relationship do you have when you encounter obstacles? What is your first thought that comes up? Now, what is your thought if the obstacles keep piling up one after the other? So not just the first, but now a series of obstacles when you are trying to embark on a new life path, a manifestation, a project, a business, a relationship. Now, what is your thought about resistance? Here's mine. When I first encounter an obstacle, I become curious. I pay attention. And most of the time, I move forward anyway. But I have almost my alert system that's up. I call this increasing the saliency. And it's equivalent to turning up the stereo dial on your attention. Because what I want to understand is this a one-off event, a one-off challenge, an obstacle that needs to be worked through? I'm all about problem solving. I'm obviously not deterred by obstacles. But now, from a point of spiritual maturity, what I want to assess is this lifeline or new direction or project going to be a series of obstacles, one after the other? Because if so, then that tells me that I am headed into a direction, a manifestation that has high friction between me and my goals and the manifestations coming into full fruition. And I am now at a point of my spiritual awakening where I have learned to work in tandem with the universe and to not control the timing. And what I now believe is that when there is a high amount of resistance or a series of obstacles, especially one after the other, it is an indication to me that the divine timing is not in alignment. And yes, I could push through, and sometimes, depending on your situation, that might be the right answer, which is why it's not white or black or all or none. But now my relationship with resistance is that I see it with this critical eye, and I assess the situation differently, where I see it as I'm working with 4 to 5 different manifestation potentials at one time. Some of them are like cacti out in the United States or West Texas. They don't need a lot of water and they don't need a lot of attention. But some of my manifestations are like rose gardens. So they need a little more pruning, they need a little more watering, they need a little more touching. And what I want to do as a gardener is I want to be sure that I'm putting my energy into the right manifestations at the right time, and not overwatering and drowning my manifestations and not neglecting them either, but finding and striking that beautiful balance. And so as a result, resistance has taken a new meaning for me in my spiritual awakening journey, where now I see it as an indication of how ready the universe is to co-create with me. Or, to go back to the garden analogy, how ready and ripe my manifestation potential is to be worked with. Because some seeds, when they start to sprout, need to be left alone. And resistance can be a sign that the manifestation is actually not ready for you to really enter into or to work with. And so there's lots of barriers and obstacles that if you would just wait, sometimes a weekend, a day, months, or years, if you would wait, your experience bringing that manifestation into its fullest potential would be very, very different. Because when you are aligned with divine timing, what happens is that everything falls into place. And so, yes, you can show up to your manifestations a little bit early and practice waiting and practice working with the potentials with a little bit of resistance, but seeing them respond to you in a way where all of the doors relatively easily open, versus you could be standing at the doorstep of your manifestations, banging on the door, forcing it open. And when you get inside, the people there are not happy to see you, or they're not ready. So they sit you in a waiting room and fumble with papers and files. And now you're just sitting there wasting time. When if you respected the timing of the universe, then what you can do is you can more readily dance with the flow of manifestations. So by understanding the resistance, and the rain in the background is so beautiful, I don't know if you can hear this, and understanding your relationship to resistance, you can unlock the next level of working with manifestations and more gracefully going through the ascension process.